The story of money begins with a quiet lie we agree to tell together. A coin says it is worth more than the metal it is stamped from. A note says it is worth more than the ink that names it. One empire after another promises that the mark on the surface is backed by something under the earth, or under heaven, or under arms. And for a time, belief makes it true. Then armies grow, debts lengthen, and the weight of yesterday's victories lands on tomorrow's currency. The coins look the same, the value doesn't. In the 16th century, a mountain of silver rises like a mirage over Spain. Potosi, the Cerro Rico, bleeds bullion into a thirsty world. Galleons cross the Atlantic, heavy with bars stamped by a distant crown. Prices drift upward like smoke. Bread costs more, wool costs more, war costs most of all. The Habsburg Empire fights on too many fronts and signs too many promises. The crown suspends payments in 1557, again in 1575, again in 1596, because even a mountain cannot finance infinity. The flood that made Spain rich makes Spain fragile. Silver cheapens silver, and creditors begin to read royal seals as warnings, not guarantees. When your power is mined from the earth, the seam always runs out, first in the ground, then in the trust of men. To the north, in Holland's narrow marshes, a different kind of treasure is engineered, credibility. Amsterdam in the 1600s becomes a harbor for numbers. The Bank of Amsterdam opens in 1609 and establishes a ledger that is harder than coins, because it clears without clipping, counts without argument, and anchors trade with a steel pen. The Dutch East India Company sells slices of itself to anyone with a purse. Risk is sliced, traded, priced. The guilder gains the quiet sanctity that hard money earns when it refuses to wobble. And yet discipline lives next to mania like a candle beside a curtain. The tulip bulb, with its stripes and promised edges, becomes a ticket to instant ascent until in 1637 the bids vanish, the curtain catches, and the room is briefly on fire. The Republic survives because its institutions are stronger than its fever. That is a pattern. In times of stress, the market asks, what stands behind the price? Metal, law, or habit? In France, a century later, a gambler with a brilliant mind makes paper whisper like gold. John Law persuades the regent in 1716 to let him found a bank, then a company, then a scheme that knits the Mississippi's future to the present's hunger. Notes are printed, shares rise, streets buzz, and suddenly the country is rich on the promise of tomorrow's river. In 1720, the notes return for redemption and find that paper is light, while exit doors are narrow. Prices explode, then implode. Trust breaks not in an argument, but in a gesture, one hand returning a bill across a counter, another hand shaking its head. 50 years later, the Revolution prints assignats against confiscated lands, imagining that liberty can be collateral. By the 1790s, bread costs what dignity used to. Paper is an idea. If you multiply the idea faster than you multiply grain, you end up with fire. Britain studies these lessons and builds an empire around a simple vow. The pound will be what we say it is because gold will say so too. After 1815, London's gold standard binds the world to a single yardstick. Sterling becomes the invoice of global trade, the language of ports, the quiet faith behind cables and checks. Crises arrive, the Overend Gurney failure in 1866, Barings in 1890. But the Bank of England plays organist to panic, opening the pipes of liquidity with a doctrine the world will later memorize. Lend freely, at a penalty, against good collateral. Credibility is a machine that hums best when seldom used. But the empire's reach keeps lengthening and the costs follow, invisible at first, then obvious. Railways, colonies, dreadnoughts. The ledger records not only lines of credit, but lines of history written in iron and coal and blood. Then come the wars that break the meter. In 1914, the gold standard is put into a museum case for the duration, and the duration lasts long enough to change everything. Britain borrows from the future to survive the present. When it tries to return to gold in 1925, the weight of the old parity drags the economy under like a stone. In 1931, sterling gives up, and the pound bows to reality. This is how reserve status ends, not with a theatrical collapse, but with a quiet admission that your currency can no longer lift the empire it built. The center of gravity shifts, while the coins still clink in cups and the manners remain exquisite. A new creditor sits across the ocean, running a newer kind of empire, one of factories, films, and oil. At Bretton Woods in 1944, the world drafts a treaty with yesterday and tomorrow. The dollar will be convertible into gold at $35 an ounce, and everyone else will be convertible into the dollar. The United States emerges from the war with industry intact, oil priced in its language, and a navy to keep the sea lanes honest. Europe and Japan rebuild. Their growth is measured in dollars that can, if asked, turn back into metal. This works as long as America runs a surplus and the rest of the world needs dollars as badly as hands need oxygen. But success is paradox. The more the system works, the more dollars the world accumulates abroad, and the heavier the promise of convertibility becomes. The day comes when gold cannot carry a decade of IOUs. In August 1971, the promise is broken with a calm sentence from a calm room. The gold window closes. At first, it feels like a clerical change. Then the world inhales and realizes that money has become untethered to earth and married to growth itself. The petrodollar emerges as an arrangement. Oil will be priced in dollars, and dollars will be welcomed where oil lives. Meanwhile, inflation bruises the decade. In the early 1980s, the Federal Reserve lifts interest rates so high that history tilts. Factories close, but the currency's credibility returns. Deregulation follows. Wall Street learns to slice risk into tranches and call them assets. Derivatives bloom like glass orchids. The economy's heartbeat moves from production to credit, from the machine to the model, from steel to spread. We inhabit a world where leverage is not an aberration, but an element, like oxygen, dangerous at high concentration, necessary at normal doses. Then, in 2008, the oxygen thins. A mortgage market we told ourselves was diversified turns out to be a single song sung by different choirs. When a few voices crack, the harmony collapses. The dollar, paradoxically, strengthens. In panic, the world runs toward the very empire it questions. Because when systems fail, liquidity beats ideology. Central banks open facilities that sound like alchemy but function like engineering. Swap lines, quantitative easing, forward guidance. The balance sheet becomes the flagship of the order. Trillions materialize and the system holds. Not unscathed, not unchanged. But it holds. From 2010 onward, the new realm is defined by interventions that would have seemed profane in older liturgies. In 2019, a hiccup in the overnight repo market reveals how tightly wound the machine is. In 2020, a plague throws the global economy against the wall, and fiscal stimulus keeps it breathing. The dollar weaponizes its plumbing in 2022 by sanctioning a major power's reserves. The message is clear to every finance minister with a long memory. Money is also foreign policy. Quietly, the hedges grow. Central banks increase gold purchases to levels not seen in decades. Nations experiment with central bank digital currencies, new payment rails, commodity-linked deals, regional swaps. None of these dethrone the dollar. Together, they describe a world planning. For a day when a single anchor might not be enough. 5 empires, 5 versions of the same temptation. Spain believed resources were wealth. It learned that price cares about flow, not origin. The Dutch believed structure could master risk. They learned that belief can outrun the scaffolding. France believed paper could summon prosperity. It learned that promises must be rationed like bread. Britain believed rules could outlast costs. It learned the bill for a global order is payable in currency strength. America believed credibility could be rebuilt as often as needed. It learned credibility is a perishable good that must be earned expensively and preserved jealously. Each time, the pattern rhymes. Expansion, overreach, the softening of discipline, the quiet revolt of math, the replacement of one anchor by another that looks, for a time, inevitable. The question implied by the title lingers like a taste. Is the dollar next? The sober answer is that reserve currencies do not die, they retire. They fade from an absolute center to a powerful plurality. They lose market share, basis point by basis point, trade by trade. They continue to mediate crises long after their peak, because the network they built prefers continuity to purity. Even sterling, displaced nearly a century ago, remains a major store of value. The dollar's end, if it comes, will look like more invoices and other units, more swaps that bypass New York, more ports with dual signage, more settlement in baskets, more gold that never leaves vaults because its movement is a signal. It will not look like a cliff. It will look like a tide. But history is not a judge with a fixed sentence. It is a weighing scale. What can be renewed? Credibility can. A central bank can suffer and recover. A government can choose slower growth for firmer ground. Industry can be rebuilt. Corruption can be prosecuted. Deficits can be reduced with politics that remember arithmetic. The necessary, unfashionable choice is to reintroduce scarcity into a world terrified of it. To say no to cheap credit when it flatters. To prefer boring balance sheets to heroic speeches. The paradox is that restraint is more explosive than stimulus over a long enough horizon. When money recovers the ability to say enough, economies regain the ability to dream without lying. Consider again the 5 stations on this road. Spain discovered that wealth without discipline multiplies prices, not power. The Dutch learned that markets need a clearinghouse that refuses to gossip with fashion. France learned that paper backed by hope dissolves under heat. Paper backed by assets and constraint becomes money. Britain learned that global order rests on the hard edge of convertibility, whether to gold or to something as credible. America learned that you can suspend the old rules and survive, provided you replace them with rules that markets perceive as harsher. Volcker's rates were a sermon in numbers. The value of a dollar was defended not with ships, but with the price of time. And yet, beneath the mechanics, there's the oldest variable, human appetite. We are creatures who love leverage because it brings tomorrow closer. We are creatures who hate cycles because they demand payment. We vote for ease until ease becomes danger. Then we discover that danger votes back. The history of money is a mirror held at an unflattering angle. It shows our talent for cooperation and our instinct for self-deception. It shows states using currency as a weapon and as a wound. It shows citizens trusting notes because they trust each other, then losing that trust in a week because truth is lumpy, showing up all at once after years of delay. So is the dollar next. The future is already here in fragments. Oil shipments priced in currencies other than green. Regional trade nets that settle in local units. A quiet, relentless bid under bullion. Digital ledgers that can clear without legacy rails. At the same time, the present holds. Most contracts, most commodities, most crises still speak American. The privilege endures because the alternative is not yet a single cathedral, but many chapels. It is easier to worship in the largest building when the storm hits. If there is a prophecy, it is gentle and merciless. What ends an age is not the rise of a rival. It is the loss of internal honesty. The day a reserve currency refuses to tell itself the truth is the day the market begins to whisper it in forward rates. The market is not moral, but it is correct in the end. The path away from that end is tedious. Fewer deficits, better audits, stricter risk weights, humility and victory, transparency and failure. Tedium is a superpower in finance. It is also the least popular platform in any election. From Potocy's silver dust to today's digital screens, we have written the same line in different inks. Value is a story that must be retold each day with a straight face. Empires become careless storytellers. They gesture instead of argue. They add adjectives where numbers should be. The world listens politely and then moves its savings elsewhere. This is not punishment, it is physics. Trust flows downhill. The coins look the same, the value doesn't. If the pattern holds, the dollar will not shatter, it will share. It will feel less like a throne and more like a chair at a long table where others are finally invited to sit. Whether that is decline or maturity depends on choices we make while the music is still playing. History doesn't repeat, but it audits, it reconciles. It subtracts our poetry and leaves the sum of our trades. Ignore it, and it will crush you all the same.